Good evening and welcome to Wavelength, the show where we talk to local people about local issues in the hope of helping everybody to get a little bit more on the same wavelength. I'm your host, Ian Butler, and it's been a couple of years since I've done one of these shows, so we'll see how it goes, but I'm happy to be back again, and hopefully we'll start putting these together on a regular basis again. So this show, our guest is Sally Lieber, who is a candidate for Jerry Hill's State Senate seat, I think California District 13.
Right, lucky 13.
Lucky 13. Jerry's been termed out, so Sally is here trying to hopefully get that seat here, the next person here. So welcome to the show, Sally.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm happy to get you on the show here, get you over here into Pacifica. So why don't you explain why it is that you decided that you would run for this seat?
Well, I was previously in the State Assembly for 3 terms, and I found that despite all the atmospherics in Sacramento, which are many, it is still very possible to do positive things for people. And I loved serving people when I was on a local city council and was mayor.
What city council was that?
I was on Mountain View City Council
okay.
and was mayor there. And then I loved serving in the State Assembly and having the chance to do legislation to help people, and also to do a lot of constituent casework and to be trusted with people's problems and helping them to solve them. So that's essentially why I'm running for state senate, is just to make a progressive change in the state legislature and do good things that need doing right now.
Great. Well, I see there's, 5 candidates right now? And it seems of them, you are the progressive candidate. I know that Pacifica Progressive Alliance has endorsed you officially now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So it seems like you got the progressive cred. Yeah.
I think so. And I love the Progressive Alliance. You know, Pacifica is just one of these great tight-knit communities where people really step up to help each other and to collaborate. There are a lot of good efforts in Pacifica around preventing harm and really working on the issues. So everything from the Beach Coalition to everything that's happening with the schools, I just really love Pacifica. So it's a great place to be.
Well, I know this much, like Jerry Hill and Jackie Spear and the various people that have represent Pacifica, they always like to come here because it's fun. It's get to go to the beach, right? So
it's fantastic.
You get a lot of chance to spend time here working on Pacifica issues because in the course of working on those issues, you get to hang out in a beautiful beach community.
Yeah, I'll get out the 4-3 wetsuit and come right down.
Right on. Yeah. So you're the progressive candidate. Now, what kind of progressive issues do you think that you would be able to work on in the state senate that might be able to help our communities here?
Yeah, I think that the top most important issue that we all have to be working on at all levels of government right now is trying to stem the impacts and the causes of the climate collapse that we're seeing. And I think Pacifica is ground zero for that in terms of sea level rise.
Yeah.
And we have less time, scientists are telling us, than we were hoping to have. We maybe don't have the 10 years that we were anticipating. And I think that California has been and can still be really at the forefront of fighting against dramatic climate changes. And so that's really job one to my mind. Dealing with the massive housing crisis that we're seeing right now, the crisis of gentrification.
Well, before we move on to the next, let's talk a little bit more of the climate change side of it. Because we have a few issues to talk about.
Yeah.
But climate change now, I know that Trump pulled out of the Paris Accord, but California seems to be doing everything it can to still do its part, even though we're not in the climate accord. So is that the idea of ways to kind of bypass some of the federal slowness for California to be a leader?
Well, I think that we need to use our market power and our leadership culturally and economically. At various times, we're either the 5th or the 6th largest economy in the world. We're definitely a world power in terms of cultural influence. And if we do it in California, it will spread to other places, and we can catch up to where Europe is. I think that the most impactful thing that we can do is to try to pursue electrification of everything possible. California is still 70% dependent on natural gas, which produces greenhouse gases.
Right.
And so we have to switch to renewable sources of electricity to replace all of that. And it's going to be a real challenge. I know that the coast was really impacted by the public safety shutoffs that PG&E was pursuing. And we really have to have some strong leadership to step forward around that and to have California be in the lead environmentally, make that our moonshot.
We would like to have a situation where we don't have our power outages anymore. That would be nice. If you could help make that happen, because we hated that.
Yeah, I think the key is locally produced and locally stored renewable energy.
Decentralizing
we
the
can
grid.
get there. Yeah, decentralizing the grid. And I've done a lot of study over the past few years about the grid and about what they call the Western Donut and the status of storage of energy. And there's so much more that we can be doing and that we have to be doing for our future. It's kind of a no-choice situation right now.
Yeah. Well, Pacific has been ground zero for ocean erosion, and now we have the fires and we definitely need, it's not a theoretical thing anymore. It's right here. It's getting us.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was in the Assembly, I carried the legislation that created the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. And now, thanks to the voters, we have $550 million to be the local match to get federal funds to restore the Bay. And I think we just have to take the chance on big environmental measures like that to be pushed forward.
Great. Well, glad to see that that's at the top of your list here. That's
absolutely.
As a species, that's the top of our list. So you mentioned housing. Tell a little bit your ideas on that.
Yeah, I talk to people every day in the Bay Area who are suffering from the gentrification crisis and the rent crisis and the eviction crisis in the Bay Area. And when you look at the hot spots on the eviction maps, they're all around us here on the peninsula.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to have some more dense housing that's linked to transit and small businesses. Because the crisis in rentals is also a crisis for small business, and we see some really long-standing small businesses that are being forced out of our communities as well.
But you're saying centralized, so you want to have public transportation and have the housing near that, so we can house the people without increasing our use of fossil fuels and also making the gridlock even worse, I guess.
And without pushing further and further into the Central Valley, and as you said,
and then
just
people have to travel
having
even
traffic
farther.
Jams that folks idle in their cars in. And, sometimes I go down to Santana Row in San Jose, and it's a very dense environment, and people will get in their car and drive to be in a dense, packed-in environment because it's interesting. It's an exciting kind of multi-generational space with places for people to sit and people watch and et cetera. And I think that we can have that, for example, all along the Caltrain line. And have those kinds of innovations and also the kinds of housing that we used to have in some cases. on the peninsula, which were more compact opportunities for housing and affordable. And I think that it has to be really affordable at all levels. I'm very involved in the movement for safe parking because there are going to be an increasing number of people who are going to be living in vehicles. And we have to have planning for them as well. And there's an increasing number of women who are living in their vehicles. And so how do we have safety around that issue? And just deal with it because it's a reality.
Well, I was reading your bio, and I learned a very interesting thing, is that you actually lived for a couple of days as a homeless person to better understand what their needs are, what their situation is. Tell a bit about that, because I find that very fascinating.
Well, that was something that was really a learning experience for me. It was only several days, but I felt like it really changed my life a lot.
I'll bet.
And made me really thankful for the things that I have when I returned.
Wow.
And it's something that I think that anybody can do is if you just take a little bit of change in a baggie and walk out your front door and just keep going.
Were you actually panhandling?
Yeah.
Yeah? How did that go?
It was pretty rough actually to swallow my pride and to break into that.
I'll bet.
And I saw how the services that we think are so available really aren't, and how frustrating it can be to take a bus to a place that you think there are going to be showers, and the showers are only once a week. And so you've just spent all your money getting there.
And all that effort and time. And
for nothing.
And now you're in the wrong place. Yeah.
Yeah, or having people tell me, I would love to give you some money, but how do I know that you won't just use it for drugs?
Right, yeah.
And, it was very, very lonely and heartbreaking. And when I came back from that, the hardest thing was to walk back up to my house and to fit that key into the door and to see how much we have that in many cases we don't even need or use, but how protected our lives are if we're privileged to have housing.
Yeah. Well, I find it really refreshing that you did that, and I think that everybody could benefit from something like that, just to have an understanding of how these people live, because it's easy for them to fall into like the stereotype of what that is and base it on some ideological ideas. But you actually know the nuts and bolts of that, and I find that really refreshing.
Yeah, I would say that the most impactful thing was how little time it takes you to just feel like a complete pigeon on the street. Because no one looks at you. Yeah. No one asks you a question.
Yeah.
People just are stepping over you or walking right past you.
Yeah.
And so you start to feel really
invisible.
Totally invisible.
Yeah. I always try to make an effort to say hi and make eye contact. I don't usually give them money, but I always make sure to let them know, I acknowledge that they're there. That's meaningful. It really is. It makes a big difference. Yeah. All right, but so that's the people at the very bottom end, but at many income levels, people need help. So I guess there's different planning for those different stages that you need to work towards.
Well, I think regardless of income level in the Bay Area right now, people are feeling like our lives are unstable in a certain way, and part of that are the national politics and what's happening environmentally. But I think as we look around us too, so many people feel only partly stable in their health care, in housing.
That's, of course, the other big one is the health care side of it,
Yeah, and I'm really a supporter of Medicare for all and fighting for that. I think that we deserve the stability that people have in Canada and in many other countries.
Yeah, I'm jealous.
To just take that off the table is a worry and a concern.
Would that be something to do California only if necessary, or would that have to be a national thing for Medicare for all? Could a state pull that off, you think, on its own?
I think that California can. And when I was in the state assembly, we passed a single-payer universal coverage bill through both houses of the legislature, which is not an easy thing to do with the really wealthy health insurers fighting you every step of the way.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it was vetoed by the governor at that time. But I think
Was
that's
that Schwarzenegger back then?
Yeah, Schwarzenegger. It's something that we can do, and it would be great if it happened on the federal level because people should be covered. Healthcare is a right. But I think that we can achieve something in California if the federal government doesn't come along.
Just as an aside, would you like to tell us which presidential candidate you? I'm thinking.
Oh, gosh.
Hearing you say that, I'm thinking Elizabeth Warren. I don't know.
I am a big fan of Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as so you think Medicare for all is the answer, I guess, for
I think it really is. And the reality is that we have rationed care right now. And it's rationed by folks that have a business interest in denying us care. And I think that there's a better way out there, that we could have preventive health care and comprehensive health care. Something that's really important for me is extending mental health care to Californians. And we see the impact of not having that and having a system that's so loose that you can't even call it anything like a safety net. And I think that we could take a lot of costs out of the system by having real mental health parity coverage under Medicare for all.
We would all certainly benefit from having people that need mental health care getting it.
Yeah.
That's for sure. It makes just society a better place for everybody. Not just for the people that need it, but the people that live in a society with those people that need it, you know?
Yeah, when I was in the state assembly, so many times we had the families in our office, and their stories are lengthy and complex and so exhausting for them. With
it's
health
true.
care or mental health care.
I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I guess in a few days we have to get our covered California thing for the next year. It's complicated, you know. It doesn't.
It really
I wish
is.
it was. I wish it could be simpler. You know, where it's automatic. You just go to the doctor. That would be nice.
And Medicare just works. It's proven.
Yeah. Now, short of a national or a statewide Medicare thing, is there incremental steps that you could be taking as far as legislation that would help everybody in the meanwhile?
Yeah, I think
ideas?
that there are a lot of preventive steps. I mean, many of the communities in the Bay Area have made great strides towards that, including for people in the community that are homeless. And homeless health care in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties is a real thing and is happening. But I think having the security of coverage for everyone is the step that we really need.
That's the important part.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Now I'm looking over some of your main topics. Fighting special interests is certainly high on the list, and of course, healthcare is a part of that as well. But tell about that. How do you think that's poisoned our discourse here?
Well, when I was up in Sacramento before, I had a little apartment right across from the Capitol, and so I'd get up there Monday mornings and kind of start to get ready for the week and look out the window and see who was walking over to the Capitol, and I could see individual people that I knew heading there. And then at a certain point in the morning, you would just see the mass hordes moving towards the Capitol. And I don't mean to say something negative about lobbyists across the board, but it is such a money-driven system there. And you see the impact on policy where the kinds of legislation that predominates are little fixes for big corporations. And that's not really what helps the community, is if we change the rules to let a rental car agency make an extra $10 off each person. That hasn't done much for humanity.
No, in fact, maybe negative for most of us,
Yeah, and
people that use cars, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever happened to rent a car. And it really drums out the kind of legislation that we need to empower people with disabilities, to provide supports for working families, to help the environment, to fully fund schools, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm really concentrating on a grassroots, community-based campaign. I have signed a pledge to not take any fossil fuel money, to not accept the landlord's money that's so often being funneled through the Realtors Association into political contests.
Well,
up
we
and
know
down
that
the
here in
peninsula.
Pacifica, where about 3/4 of the money spent on our local election was spent by out-of-town realtors. So
Yeah,
it's hard to represent the people when most of the money is coming from out-of-town business interests.
yeah, and I think that we need to say no to just the arms race of money overall.
Right.
I've been a member of the board of the Clean Money Campaign for a number of years, and we've gotten some good transparency measures passed. Many of them have been authored by Kevin Mullen, who represents us in the Assembly.
Yeah.
And I just think that we have to have a few candidates who are saying no to some of the money. The spending limit for this race is $930,000. And we have 3 candidates who have already said that they will raise and spend up to the limit. And whatever gets spent by a candidate, the special interests will likely do independent expenditures of that amount too. So all of a sudden, you're north of $8 million to win, to be one of the top 2 in the primary for a state Senate seat, all of which has a negative impact on policy.
Yeah, and this is all money that's kind of going to waste. It's not doing anything to make society better. We're spending $8 million, and it's not. You can solve problems with $8 million as opposed to buying candidates.
Yeah, and so I've put it in my ballot statement that I'm not going to be filling your mailbox with just junk mail that's funded by dark money interests. And I think that a big job for us is to educate the public about where that money is coming from, that is producing all those glossy flyers, and the fact that we should ratchet down on the amount of money that's getting spent.
Yeah. Well, and this, I want to say this to the voters, the people. When you get things in the mail telling you what to vote for, usually you want to vote the opposite of that. I'm saying, because usually the reason it's in your mailbox is because somebody wants to fool you. So if anything, it should be a negative. You shouldn't let it influence your vote positively. Maybe you make you realize there's an issue that you need to study. Oh, really? They don't want me to vote that way. Find out why, and usually you find out that it's special interest trying to fool you.
Yeah, and if you dig down a couple layers, then you see that the Alliance for a Better California, I don't want to use any real names here, or the People for Better Education or whatever. Yeah. It can be some very disparate interests, including the oil companies and others who really have the bottom line.
Well, they're never going to call their company, the group, Fat Cats for Bigger Profits. I wish they'd have to. Yeah. Well, that's refreshing that you've pledged to keep a clean, person-based campaign. Of course, then the trick is, how do you get the word out? It's harder to get the word out if you do limit yourself those ways. But,
absolutely.
But that's why you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that folks are going to be watching this show and, looking at the issues that come up and looking at the experience. And out of all of us who are running, I'm the only one who served in the state assembly. And
that's a very good experience. Plus, you were the, what do they call it, pro tem, what's the word? You were something.
Yeah, Speaker Pro Tem.
Speaker Pro Tem, thank you, yes. So that's a very good experience that you had there. And it's very similar to the state Senate, so yeah. And now, I guess we need to make sure people know the dates for this stuff, because a lot of us don't really start paying attention until like November, but there's a very important election. The primary is very important.
Yeah.
And when is the primary this year?
The primary is coming up early this year. It's going to be a March 3rd primary.
Okay.
And it's the first time that it's early, and it's going to be an all mail-in ballot for both San Mateo and Santa Clara County. So that's going to be new. There are going to be, I guess, a few polling places for folks who need to cast a provisional ballot or something happened to their mail-in ballot. But pretty much everybody is going to get a mail-in ballot. So you need to check your mailbox for a big, thick envelope.
Okay, this is important. This is a big difference. Yeah, it's earlier than we're used to it being. Yeah, normally it's in the summertime. So here's in the spring. So we're all like, all right, we'll start paying attention, and then the election has already passed us by before we know. So March 3rd, way earlier than we're used to having a primary.
Yeah.
So okay, that's important. And then we have so California, it's the top 2 finishers from the primary running the general election, right?
Right,
And it's not party related like the old days.
No, it's top 2 regardless of party. And there is one proviso, is that if someone is registered as a declined state voter and they want to register in the they want to vote in the presidential election, they need to contact the elections office and make sure that they're getting a ballot that lists the presidential candidates on it.
Okay.
So that's an important one for folks to know. And it's the top 2 finishers who go on to November.
Okay, well, I wish you the best of luck in that election. It looks like we're just about, our time is just about done. So thanks so much for coming on Wavelength.
Anytime.
Yeah.
I love Pacifica.
Yes, well, not hard to love.
Yes.
I know, me too. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you're putting yourself out there and running. I know it's not easy. It's a lot of work. You did it with 2 broken ankles, I understand. Wow, and that's not easy. But you didn't let that stop you, so thanks so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, and I just want to tell everybody, well, first of all, thanks for watching PCT. I'm happy to be back here again. I want to thank the crew that's here. We have these interns. I haven't even met most of them before tonight. And also I want to thank Luigi's Pizza, which is feeding the crew the luscious, delicious Italian food. And I want to thank you for watching. Remember, we're Wavelength. We're not against them. We're a forum. Good night.